Trust in media at an all-time low. Tulsi Gabbard sides with freedom. More talks of an extension of government spying. And finally, more of Biden's executive orders. On today's episode of the Federalist Files. Hello everybody, and thank you for tuning in. We are going to be handling a lot of information today. I have a lot of different moves by the Biden administration. I think apparently the number is something like 30 executive orders in the last 5 days of his presidency, or this past week of his presidency thus far. We've already seen a decimation of estimated 70,000 jobs, which is now, if you haven't noticed, if you see that anywhere on social media, they are now fact-checking that because somehow that's out of context. Now it's considered untrue because it has not been yet verified or validated. 70,000 people have not yet been laid off, so you cannot say that there has been an estimation of 70,000 people being laid off. So that's the nonsensical stuff that we are facing from our social media. I also have some stats on that, how all-time trust in social media as well as the mainstream media is at an all-time low. And here, you know what I actually have to start the show off? I'll show you, over the weekend, Rand Paul was on MSNBC, or was it, ABC, with George Stephanopoulos. It was supposed to be a conversation between him and Klobuchar. Klobuchar had some issues with her hearing device, so then they went on with George Stephanopoulos and Rand Paul going at a back and forth, and Rand Paul really calls him out for the media hypocrisy and the partisanship from a news network that is supposed to be a news network that is objective and supposed to be impartial.
Okay, let's start with Senator Rand Paul instead. I think we have some audio problems right there. Senator Paul, let me begin with a threshold question for you. This election was not stolen. Do you accept that fact?
Well, what I would say is that the debate over whether or not there was fraud should occur. We never had any presentation in court where we actually looked at the evidence. Most of the cases were thrown out for lack of standing, which is a procedural way of not actually hearing the question.
So Rand Paul does have a point on the lack of standing issue coming from the court system. I think he said something like 86 different cases have been proposed, and not one of them have been taken by the courts because they say lack of standing, which is just really a formal way to say we're not going to take the case because we are afraid and we're cowardly. We don't want to rule on anything having to do with voting. So there really has not yet actually been a legitimate look into election fraud. There has not been a legitimate look into our election system. There has not been anything in court to prove whether or not the election was manipulated in any way. There has not really been any standing. They've not allowed for it to happen. Now, Rudy Giuliani currently is getting sued by Dominion for $1.3 billion. So Rudy Giuliani, in response, is actually elated that this information has come out, that they are suing him, because now he can present the information in the court system. So he's actually happy with it. So we'll follow that. We'll follow that story. That story will probably be, forget it, maybe years from now, or it'll take years to play itself out because our court systems are so backed up and everyone knows how slow the court system works. So next what I have is it will continue between Stephanopoulos butting in on Rand Paul, and they will give a nice back and forth here. And I think I'm going to play both clips for you straight through so you can get a full context of really what Rand Paul is calling him out for. So play clip.
What I would suggest is that if we want greater confidence in our elections, and 75% of Republicans agree with me, is that we do need to look at election integrity, and we do need to see if we can restore confidence in the elections.
Well, 75% of Republicans agree with you because they were fed a big lie by President Trump and his supporters who say the election was stolen. Why can't you say,
well, I think where
President
you make,
Biden won a
I think where you
legitimate
make
and fair
a mistake, hey, George, where you make a mistake is that people coming from the liberal side like you immediately say everything's a lie instead of saying there are two sides to everything. Historically, what would happen is if I said that I thought there was fraud, you would interview someone else who said there wasn't. But now you insert yourself in the middle and say the absolute fact is that everything I'm saying is a lie.
I said the Department of Justice found no evidence. Let me finish my point.
No, you say
you said something that was not true.
You say we're all liars. You're just simply saying we're all liars. And
I said it was a lie that the election was stolen.
Premise that you're right and we're wrong. Well, let's talk about the specifics of it. In Wisconsin, tens of thousands of absentee votes had only the name on them and no address. Historically, those were thrown out. This time they weren't. They made special accommodations because they said, oh, it's a pandemic, and people forgot what their address was. So they changed the law after the fact. That is wrong. That's unconstitutional. And I plan on spending the next 2 years going around state to state and fixing these problems. And I won't be cowed by liberals in the media who say, there's no evidence here and you're a liar if you talk about election fraud. No, let's have an open debate. It's a free country.
So Rand Paul, his appeal is, you guys are not impartial judges. You make it like you are, like you're a news station, like you're a news source for the people, but you are not. You butt in, and you do not give both sides of the story. You just give your side, and you browbeat whoever is the dissenting opinion. In this case, it was Rand Paul, and Rand Paul was not having it. And he says it's simple. The media just says that we are lying and we are liars, but they usually do not present any evidence. Usually what they will do is they will use the government, or they will use an appeal to authority saying, oh, well, the Department of Justice didn't say anything happened. Well, the Department of Justice also did not thoroughly investigate anything. The Department of Justice just in general said that. Bill Barr said it, I think because Bill Barr is actually afraid of what will happen if people distrust the institutions of the United States of America. There was not a legitimate vetting process of any type of election fraud, and then when it was tried in the system of the Senate for an election fraud task force on January 6th, everyone voted to reject it. So now what you have is you have something coming to fruition. You have the anger of the American people and the general feeling that they were cheated and they never got to see their case in court. They believe that there was election fraud, that persisted, that happened, and it was never seen in court. And that's really what the issue here is. And that's why the people feel the way they do at this point. And that's why their trust in the media is at an all-time low, because the media likes to butt in, and the media is partisan. They are bootlickers, and most of them are about 90% to the Democrat Party. Now, why is it that you can't have a discussion on election fraud? It seems like it's something that's taboo. You can't go on YouTube. I can't post any videos about it. If I put this video up on YouTube, it might get taken down, might get my second strike. I'm going to put it up on YouTube. I don't know what's going to happen. Me just mentioning election fraud, I'm not really sure what that means exactly. And then he also points to instances in Wisconsin where they went against the Constitution by changing the laws through an executive fiat, just like they did in Pennsylvania with the I think it was the Secretary of State there changed the rules, and then the same thing in Georgia, the Secretary of State once again changed the rules. So these are all constitutional problems, and these are all things that are in direct violation of the Constitution. This is black and white information that the legislatures of the state thereof is tasked with making the election laws and the rules, the manner, the time of the election is all up to the state legislative branch. And that was not done. So that is unconstitutional on its face, but still it was not seen in court. So there's no lack of standing from the Supreme Court saying that is a lack of standing is just inaccurate. There's a standing there because it's directly contradictory to the Constitution, and there's supposed to be a deference to the Constitution first and foremost. So because of all of this, I have an Axios piece. Trust in the media is at an all-time low. It is written by Felix Salmon. For the first time ever, fewer than half of all Americans have trust in traditional media, according to data from Edelman's annual Trust Barometer, shared exclusively with Axios. Trust in social media has hit an all-time low of 27%. So you're telling me 27% of Americans trust in social media, and social media meaning those fact checkers that come out. When you see a fact check, only 27% of people actually believe it. So 56% of Americans agree with the statement that, and I quote, journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations, end quote. So we have more than half the country thinks that journalists and reporters are purposely misleading everybody, which I am of that 56%. 58% think that most news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or political position than with informing the public. And once again, I am of the 58% that thinks that. Now, when Edelman repolled Americans after the election, the figures had deteriorated even further, with 57% of Democrats trusting the media. 57. So you have a very small percentage of a very small majority of Democrats that trust the media, and most media across the board, at least 90% of it, is Democrat based. And then only 18% of Republicans actually trust the media. And it has nothing to, everyone sits there, they blame Trump. They'll throw the finger, well, Trump. And then, well, the other news agencies, it's because they call us out on our lies, but they're perpetuating lies. That's what they say. And then you go back and you watch those news agencies, and then if you look up the information yourself and the data, it actually comports on a lot of these right-wing news stations. So what it is the right wing is really just calling you out for your lies, and they specifically call you out for times that you have lied on their show directly, and then when you go on your show, Brian Stelter, Don Lemon, as well as not even really as much Chris Cuomo, he's kind of more moderate, but MSNBC, what's the other one's name? Rachel Maddow. You go out on your show and you just say in a general sense, oh, well, they're lying to the people, but they never have specific instances. They don't pull up the network and show videos, because I watch CNN. They do not show specific instances and videos of when right-wing reporters or right-wing opinion guys are lying. They may say, oh, they're bombastic, or they're being divisive in their rhetoric, or they're stoking the flames of division. They say things like that. That doesn't mean anything. That's all just feeling-based. That's appeal to emotion fallacy. No one really cares about that. What we care about is a substantive argument that is rooted in some sort of facts or data-driven. That's all that the American people really should be looking at, and it should also be driven as well in policy and constitutionalism and those values themselves. And that's generally what the people on the right, I'm not going to say the Republican Party, because the Republican Party is representative of a lot of hacks that are really Democrats. If you notice, Republicans somehow, it's always, there's a couple of Republicans that are Democrats, but Democrats are never Republicans. You'll have Mitt Romney, Republican, that's really a Democrat. Or you'll have Lisa Murkowski was another one, Susan Collins, who are Republicans, but really Democrats. But you never have Democrats that are really Republicans. It never works that way. Sometimes they may vote a certain way just because they know they will lose their seat in the Senate. But other than that, they are not Republicans. The Democrats are strictly Democrats. And then the Republicans, some of them are Democrats. So, by the numbers, 61% of Trump voters say that they trust their employer's CEO. That compares to just 28% who trust government leaders and a mere 21% of who trust journalists. So, you're telling me right now that we actually trust the government. We don't trust them much more, but by 7% more than we trust journalists right now in the United States. So as Trump voters, Trump voters actually trust. 61% of them trust their employer's CEO much more than they do the government and the journalists. And so this obviously, all this information that comes out, this is due to the way that the media exaggerates, CNN. I have a clip here, and I will play a clip instead of just generalizing and saying it and then not showing any type of information to back it up. I have Jim Acosta talking about a shutdown on CNN. I think he's talking to Brian Stelter about it. I think it's Brian Stelter, and he's talking to him about it to shut down more conservatives. Play clip 8.
As the disinformation industrial complex, and that is, Trump and his people, conservative outlets like Fox News, and then conservative websites and organizations aligned with the president and conservative platforms. These three pillars of this disinformation industrial complex essentially helped put Trump in power, kept him in power, sustained his grip on the Republican Party, and it remains a threat to our democracy. It is the reason why there were hundreds of Trump supporters storming the Capitol on January 6th. And until that poison, that toxin is drained from the national political discourse in this country, Brian, I do think that these forces represent a potential existential threat to this country and have the potential to come back and cause more suffering in the days to come.
So Acosta essentially saying that dissenting opinions are an existential threat to the United States of America. So what do we do then with an existential threat? Something that you would consider an existential threat to the United States of America. I would say you would eradicate it. So what are they going to do to eradicate dissenting opinions? And he's also characterizing as if there's this huge apparatus of conservative talk show hosts. Now, there are a lot of them do pretty well, pretty good viewership, but it has nothing to do with some sort of industrial complex. 90% of the media is liberal. But it seems like 10% of the media that's conservative, they're very popular. Why is that? Maybe it's because their ideas resonate with the population. The reason that they're around has nothing to do with big donors. It's just like the NRA. They are not that around because there are big donors. It's because what they say resonates and relates to people, and it comports with their ideology, and then they go and they continue to watch them. They just cannot fathom that people think differently than them, and they can't really truly figure it out. And they always go back to Trump because the way their ideology works is they don't believe in actual principles and values. They just believe in people. They believe in government power. They believe in raw political power that they can use to crush political enemies and adversaries. And that's the reason that they go after Trump so much, and they're so annoyed. They think everything somehow Trump is some mad, crazy genius, which just is not true. It's just what Trump was saying resonated with a lot of people, and they were able to relate with it, and that's why they liked Trump, and that's why they voted for him, or that's why they tuned in to Sean Hannity or Rush Limbaugh or Ben Shapiro. Actually, if you watch a lot of the people that are on right-wing media, they have multiple times they have disagreed with the president. You had Buck Sexton has disagreed with the president, as well as Dan Bongino has on certain occasions. Ben Shapiro all the time. There's a lot of them that are not, and as well as Matt Walsh is another one. There's a lot of them that are not vehemently pro-Trump all of the time, no matter what. Whereas the left-wing media is I've never seen the left-wing media come out there and dissent to Obamacare before. I've never seen that before. I've never seen anyone that is of the left do that before. So next what I have Tulsi Gabbard. Actually, she goes on, I think she's on, I don't even know what show exactly this is. What does it look like? MSNBC? Oh no, that isn't MSN. This is straight from her Twitter page, actually. She characterizes John Brennan, and I remember I showed you guys the John Brennan interview that he had, and I'm going to show you it again. It's going to be a little bit of a longer clip, but I think it's worth your while just to understand. This is the person, Tulsi Gabbard is the one that was ostracized from the Democrat Party because she did not follow the narrative that they were trying to build up about people that were on the opposing side. She actually is pro-America in a lot of her policies. She has some very, very far left policies and ideology, but she's at least civil in her discourse, and she actually loves America. So play clip 10.
But let's be clear. The John Brennans, Adam Schiffs, and the oligarchs in big tech who are trying to undermine our constitutionally protected rights and turn our country into a police state with KGB-style surveillance are also domestic enemies, and much more powerful and therefore dangerous than the mob that stormed the Capitol. Now, John Brennan said,
so I know looking forward that the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians.
Now, President Biden, I call upon you and all members of Congress from both parties to denounce these efforts by the likes of Brennan and others to take away our civil liberties that are endowed to us by our Creator and guaranteed in our Constitution. If you don't stand up to these people now, then our country will be in great peril.
The argument here is that we do not want our country. We are headed down a dark path right now. If we're going to allow for these constitutional infringements, if we're going to somehow extend the spy state that was created through the Patriot Act, where the government can spy now we don't even know the extra powers that are going to be afforded by this next domestic, I think it's called the Domestic Terrorism Act of 2021. That's being pushed right now through Congress, and I'm going to go through it a little bit here. I have something from Ron Paul's site, but first off, I want to say Tulsi, what she's appealing to when she says our constitutional liberties, she's talking about the Fourth Amendment of the United States. I'm going to read it off. It states, and I quote, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized," end quote. So that's the Fourth Amendment. That one is paramount to your existence as a free citizen. It's probably the third most important one, or maybe the fourth most important amendment to the Constitution of the Bill of Rights. So what she's saying here is you can't extend the spy state. You can't extend having this limitless power to spy on Americans as the Chinese government does, to spy on them. And this coming from a CIA director is a serious problem. A former CIA director is a serious problem. And you can't do that. It is in violation of the Fourth Amendment of the United States. Are we now going to just spy on people because of what their political affiliation is? Is that what we're going to allow the FBI to do at this point? So this is what I was talking about the Ron Paul Institute. I'm going to have everything, as always, everything I'm referring to will be in the show notes at the very end. I'm going to be doing, and I think I'll start doing this, I'm almost like the news aggregator. I am reading a lot of information. I'm taking in a lot of information. I am trying to put it into as consumable as a format as I can for everybody else to read. At the very end of the show, I will read off just a couple quick takes on some other articles that I was not able to get to because I just have so much information coming in. I want you guys to be the best and most well-informed audience out there, and just have an idea, a little spectrum of everything that is actually going on and how it all works in coordination with each other and how it's all related. So first, Ron Paul Institute. As I said before, everything will be in the show notes. And then at the very end of the show notes, I think that's where I'll put all the other information that I cover. At the very end, I'll have it as maybe the headlines or something like that. So it's by Dave DeCamp. It's titled "Biden Administration Announces Plan to Combat Domestic Extremism." So it starts off here. Psaki, as in the press secretary Jen Psaki, went on to outline the first steps of the Biden administration is taking. She said Biden ordered the newly confirmed Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, to conduct a threat assessment along with the FBI and Department of Homeland Security. Jen Psaki said the assessment will produce a fact-based analysis on which we can shape policy. In addition to the intelligence analysis, the National Security Council is being tasked with finding ways to disrupt extremist networks. It's not clear if the assessment will lead to U.S. government agencies being granted new authorities to counter domestic terrorism. Congress is on board with prioritizing domestic threats. Earlier this week, the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act was introduced in the House with bipartisan sponsors. The bill would establish offices within the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and Justice Department to combat domestic terrorism. So all of this is very, very troubling. It should be very troubling to you if you know anything about constitutional values. The problem here is that we are not clear if this is going to grant authorities new powers to investigate or to spy on Americans. Now, hopefully, because we have the Supreme Court, they will be able to uphold the Fourth Amendment. To begin with, a lot of people believe this Patriot Act was a violation of the Fourth Amendment, because you are spying on people without a warrant, without any type of warrant that was issued, without any type of probable cause. You are now working on a reasonable suspicion basis, which is very, very broad spectrum. So actually, what's even funnier about this here, and this is something that we really should worry about, this is how powerful governments strong-arm people into compliance, and this is almost one of the very first steps. This is the precipice to what will happen in an authoritarian regime or a spy state. And I may have mentioned this before, but people that I don't remember which podcast. I think I was listening to Dan Bongino's podcast, and he was a Secret Service agent. And when they went to China or when they went to Russia, he was told, "Hey, listen, you got anything to say? Don't say it in the room while you're inside the room. Maybe write it down, hand it to the other guy. Don't say anything that would be considered, somewhat secret information having to do with movements of presidential or other personnel that you had to protect. Don't tell them. Why? Because there's cameras and there's bugs everywhere. So if you want to live in a country where we have cameras and we have bugs everywhere, even on our personal residency, then you can go ahead and you can support this policy. So this is the NAACP comes out with a statement against this new act that they're trying to propose. It states, and I quote, "We urge you to oppose any new domestic terrorism charge, the creation of a list of designated domestic terrorist organizations or other expansion of existing terrorism-related authorities. We are concerned that a new federal domestic terrorism statute or list would adversely impact civil rights, and as our nation's long and disturbing history of targeting black activists, Muslims, Arabs, and movements for social and racial justice has shown, the new authorities could be used to expand racial profiling or be wielded in the to surveil and investigate communities of color and political opponents in the name of national security." As the acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia stated on January 12, 2021, regarding the January 6th insurrection attack on the Capitol, federal prosecutors have many existing laws at their disposal to hold violent white supremacists accountable. Now, I agree with the premise. I don't agree with the whole, all these people were white supremacists, but what have you, whatever. All that aside, they have a tremendous point, because this can be easily corrupted and taken advantage of. And like the Attorney General said, the acting U.S. Attorney General said, the federal prosecutors have many existing laws at their disposal to hold violent white supremacists accountable, as well as I think there's a lot of racketeering laws as well to catch the organized criminals, and maybe you can apply those. I don't think that we should just continue to extend the power of our federal investigatory units. So next what I have White House says that the Biden administration will undergo interagency review of Trump's China policies, including delisting telecom companies. This is a Daily Caller article written by Christian Datok. So what this one seems like here is that it seems like Biden administration is going to look through all the plans, all the Trump policies, and it sounds like they're going to make a strong move to keep them implemented. But then I've been hearing other rumblings from Ted Cruz. He's been saying in a lot of these Senate committees whether these people that they are appointing in the cabinet actually feel obligated to follow Trump's old policies. It seems like they really are kind of soft on China, from what he says. So we'll see what comes out over the next couple of weeks on this. But it starts off, the Biden administration plans on undertaking an interagency review before moving forward with or reversing a number of former President Donald Trump's policies relating to China, including the delisting of multiple Chinese telecommunication companies. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters at Monday's briefing, she stated, and I quote, "A range of regulatory actions and a range of relationships with companies as it relates to Chinese investment are just starting." So she continues. She states they will need to go through the interagency, so the State Department, the Treasury Department, a number of others who will review how we move forward. We're starting from an approach of patience as it relates to our relationship with China. She continues, that means we're going to have consultations with our allies, we're going to have consultations with Democrats and Republicans, and we're going to allow the interagency process to work its way through the review and assess how we should move forward with our relationship. The president is committed to stopping China's economic abuses on many fronts, she reiterated. The most effective way of doing that is to work in concert with our allies and partners to do exactly that. Now, I did also read an article, Boris Johnson, apparently the conversation that he had on the phone with Joe Biden a couple days ago, they're talking about doing this as well. We're not exactly sure how legitimate and how forceful Biden and his administration really thinks about this, how forthright they are in shutting down China. I'm not sure yet. We're going to have to figure it out, considering Biden has some sort of relationship or had some sort of relationship in the past. If all those allegations with his son come out to be true, This is going to be a very weird situation because Biden may feel like he is somewhat accountable, or he may feel like he can be blackmailed by China, but we're not really sure yet. Next, what I have the FBI Justice Department knew that there was no Russian collusion by spring of 2017. This is written by Rowan Scarborough, Washington Times piece, and I've actually been holding this one on the back burner just because I didn't have time to report it. It's more and more information that's going to be coming out about the FBI's Russia probe. And it starts off, the top Justice Department official in early 2017 overseeing the FBI Russia probe testified he was briefed as many as 6 times on its status and was told there was no evidence of Trump campaign collusion. A newly released transcript shows the testimony of Dana Boente is significant because during this time the FBI took major steps to expand the probe. So as the FBI, and she's a top official, Dana Boente, in the Justice Department, the FBI falls under the Justice Department. It's essentially the law enforcement wing of the federal government. So they continue to expand the probe, expand powers, do more and more investigations when she's being told in early 2017 that there is nothing. They have no information to validate what the Steele dossier said. So essentially what this is an unconstitutional investigation because there's no evidence. And President Trump in May ended up firing FBI Director James Comey, a stunning move that led to the appointment of special counsel Robert Mueller and 2 years of a White House under constant criminal scrutiny. There was no there, said Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham, who released Mr. Boente. Oh, I guess that's a guy then. Dana Boente, I guess it's a guy. Mr. Boente's June 22nd closed testimony. The investigation was pushed when it should have been stopped, and only logical explanation is that the investigators wanted an outcome because of their bias. Mr. Boente's unique position in the new Trump administration was this. Newly confirmed Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself from the Russia probe, codenamed Crossfire Hurricane by the FBI. He had spoken to the Russian ambassador while a senator from Alabama. So he spoke to a Russian ambassador. He was the senator of Alabama at the time, and then he got appointed to be and this is Jeff Sessions. He was newly confirmed to the Attorney General position. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein would not win Senate confirmation until late April. That left Mr. Boente as acting deputy and in charge of Crossfire Hurricane in February, March, and April. He asked to be briefed. And he states, I felt that it was important to know something about it, according to the transcript. And then he goes on. I don't know if and when I was told that. I think I recall being told at some point, maybe not February, between February and April, because thankfully my involvement ended in April and there was no evidence of collusion with the Trump campaign, end quote. So we have this guy, he took it over for a very short period of time, because during that time is when Jeff Sessions recused himself, and then Attorney General Rod Rosenstein was not yet confirmed by the Senate, so he was the acting, Attorney General at this time. Now, during this time, the FBI was ramping up the probe. So we had all this information coming in from the Attorney General, or the acting Attorney General at this time, Mr. Boente. All this information, there's no evidence of collusion. And then the FBI is now continuing to ramp up the probe. They are doing more investigations because they have a personal bias, and they're going after Donald Trump because now we have the FBI being used as a political wing. It's being used as the political enforcement for the Democrat Party and the deep state. Mr. Comey, as in James Comey, made it more visible nationally by testifying before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on March 20th, 2017, that the entire Trump campaign was under scrutiny for any possible links to the Kremlin. So essentially, he went up there and he lied, knowing that there was no information at this point. He went out there and he just straight up lied, saying that there's possible links to the Kremlin when there's no evidence being reported. Campaign veterans have told the Washington Times that his testimony that day put a target on their backs for the national news media. During this time, the FBI also won a judge's approval for continued wiretapping of campaign volunteer Carter Page. The FBI's affidavit was based almost exclusively on evidence provided by Democrat Party finance dossier prepared by ex-British spy Christopher Steele and sourced to the Kremlin. So Christopher Steele created this dossier because Hillary Clinton's financial firm Perkins Coie paid him to do so, and since he is a British spy, a British agent, he does not live by the same rules that the U.S. agents, and that's the reason that he was asked to do this, because the government was subverting the individual rights of a private citizen at the time, and Donald Trump. They were subverting his rights by asking somebody from outside the country to do it because he can actually do it. Our federal law enforcement here cannot do it. It is illegal what he did. So the FBI learned in January that Mr. Steele's main source, Russian-born Igor Danchenko, had told agents his information was unconfirmed hearsay, but the FBI continued to rely on the dossier. So all the information that we got from the dossier is, most of the information that was learned, the main source, Russian-born Igor Danchenko, his is all unconfirmed hearsay. By the way, double hearsay does not hold up in court, because that's what that is. That is double hearsay. So if they even got Trump on anything, the dossier that they had to start the investigation was illegitimate to begin with. Mr. Boente testified that Mr. Comey wanted to brief Congress on Crossfire Hurricane and whether Trump aides colluded with Russia to hack Democratic Party computers in 2016 and mount information warfare on social media. So Mr. Boente testified, "Well, I certainly felt that he could. Should is a much more difficult answer or question, but I acceded to his request to brief on it." So I guess we're going to go on here. There's more. Mr. Boente said the issue was a briefing to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Mr. Comey's Public House Committee appearance was not mentioned by Mr. Boente. Mr. Graham, Chief Investigative Attorney, provided another new wrinkle. He said the committee had just acquired an email written by Crossfire Hurricane Chief Agent Peter Strzok from February 2017. So Peter Strzok is pretty much in charge of the whole investigation here. He's the chief agent. So it states, and I quote, "We are unaware of any," in all caps, "we are unaware of any Trump advisors engaging in conversations with Russian intelligence officials," Mr. Summers said, quoting the Strzok email. So Peter Strzok sent an email saying that they're unaware of any of this engaging in any conversations, any Trump advisors with Russian intelligence officials. So they're all saying we don't have any information on this guy, but we're going to somehow still continue to ramp up an investigation against him. At that point, the probe was already 7 months in. It was at its 7th month. Mr. Steele wrote in the dossier that an extensive conspiracy existed between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin to interfere in the 2016 election. After Mr. Trump fired Mr. Comey, Mr. Rosenstein, appointed by Mr. Mueller, he appointed Mr. Mueller, so Robert Mueller, he appointed him as the special investigation czar, I guess you would call it, or the special counsel. He reported in March 2019 that he did not establish a Trump-Russia conspiracy. So we went on with this for more than, so 2.5 years of Trump-Russia conspiracy when there was no information. There was nothing that comported with that narrative. Trump associates have told the Washington Times that with Mr. Sessions' recusal, the president had no trusted ally inside the Justice Department who could have told him that Crossfire Hurricane was hitting dead ends. If he knew that, he might not have fired Mr. Comey, they say, and there never would have been a special counsel. Mr. Graham, as in Lindsey Graham's staff, interviewed Mr. Boente and other justice officials as part of the probe into abuse of Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the FISA court, essentially. So that was something that was, I think, also created after 9/11 and the whole Patriot Act thing, I think, under which Mr. Page was wiretapped for 12 months in 2016 to 2017. So Carter Page, they wiretapped this dude for 12 months, and then they found nothing. They got nothing on him. It goes on, and this is the very end here. "I consider the Crossfire Hurricane investigation a massive system failure by senior leadership, but not representative of the dedicated, hardworking patriots who protect our nation every day at the FBI and the Department of Justice," Lindsey Graham said. "I believe that Crossfire Hurricane was one of the most incompetent and corrupt investigations in the history of the FBI and the DOJ," end quote. So what he's saying here, essentially, bring it all together. The people that were in charge of this are deep state, all the way at the very top of the administration of the FBI. These are partisan hacks. These are not the regular agents on the ground working every single day. These are people that are taking advantage of their power and violating the Constitution. So there you go. So what you have is for 2.5 years, they went on with an investigation that was baseless the entire time to begin with, because the way in which the warrant was obtained was baseless, because the Steele dossier was a giant nothing. It was just a bunch of BS that was all double hearsay, thus not being probable cause, thus not being able to even be used in court because it's double hearsay. And then the guy that said it was the guy that they got the information from, he said he couldn't even verify it. So it's double hearsay that can't even be verified by the original source. And then we went forward with that for 2.5 years, and they pretty much dragged their feet along to try to invalidate Trump, and then it turned out to be nothing. So there you go. Perfect. So for 2 years, the reason they did this, the Democrat Party, just to be clear, they did this for 2 years to try to illegitimize the president, but then also at the same time, you had the House of Representatives was owned by the Republicans as well as the Senate. So they didn't want any type of legislation to get put forthright and get passed through. What they wanted to do is make it like Trump was a Russian agent the entire time, to create a giant cluster F so that nothing could get passed through. Now, what I have is next is all of the Biden freezing ICE, all that whole situation that's going on. But first, I want to play a clip of Tucker Carlson talking about immigration, the immigration memo that came out from Joe Biden to ICE, attempting to freeze deportations. Play clip 3.
Well, I've got some exclusive reporting for you tonight. In Joe Biden's first day in office, the Department of Homeland Security issued a sweeping directive calling for a 100-day pause on deportations. We reported that last night. We now have an internal email sent yesterday to ICE officers in Texas that shows how this order was enacted. And we're quoting, "As of midnight tonight, stop all removals. This includes Mexican bus runs, charter flights, and commercial removals until further notice. All cases are to be considered no significant likelihood of removal in foreseeable future." In other words, stop sending people here illegally back to the country of origin. The official goes on to say this, and we're quoting, "Release them all immediately. No sponsor available is not acceptable any longer." The official notes in the email that he is just, quote, the messenger explaining the directive. It wasn't his idea. It was Joe Biden's. Now, this email was news to us. Friday's memorandum from the Biden administration to halt deportations did not call for people here illegally to be released from detention. We made some calls today, and we learned that Homeland Security is currently hammering out how to enact the memorandum. It does not specifically call for the instant release of all migrants in detention. So what was this memo about? Just the result of the complete chaos that resulted when the incoming administration on its first day changed a policy this big without explaining what it means. Chaos. Well, we thought the last administration had a monopoly on that. Apparently not.
So from what it looks like, we got some strife going on right now in the Department of Homeland Security, whether it's ICE or whether it's the memorandum that came down from Joe Biden, the Biden administration. What they said is they pretty much told them to suspend deportations and to release people. And we're not exactly sure how legitimate the idea of the release program is. Now, I do know here, I have Center for Immigration Studies. I have an article here from Jessica Vaughn. It's titled, "Biden Freezes ICE, Suspends 85% of Criminal Alien Deportations." So this is to explain the actual memo here. According to the memo, virtually all removals will stop for 100 days. In addition, only the following categories of illegal aliens will be subject to removal as of February 1st, 2020. So these are the only people that actually are going to be deported. National security threats, those who have been involved in or are suspected of involvement in terrorism or who otherwise deemed a threat. Recent illegal border crossers, those who have arrived illegally after November 1st. So everybody else that arrived illegally before November 1st, no problem. They're allowed to be here. Aggravated felons, those who are currently incarcerated for an aggravated felony conviction and who are determined to be a public threat to society. Now, this is aggravated felon. So there's other people that are committing felonies, but as long as it isn't an aggravated felony, the classification as an aggravated felony, they are allowed in still. They can still be here. There's no problem with that. So it goes on. In practice, this means that ICE must release criminal aliens and others in custody who are not covered in these definitions. So this is exactly what Tucker Carlson is alluding to. This will include aliens convicted of domestic violence, sex offenses, drunk driving, theft causing loss of less than $10,000 to anybody hits the vehicular homicide, an infinite number of misdemeanor crimes, and much more. It means that when the USCIS refuses green cards or other benefits because the applications were fraudulent, that unqualified applicant will be able to stay anyway. It means that in the next 100 days, if a local police officer arrests a previously deported gang member, even one with a serious criminal history for a new crime that is not aggravated felony, ICE will not be able to take action to remove that gang member again. This is a drastic and unprecedented order, according to the ICE deportation records that I obtained through a Freedom of Information Act. Only about 15% of criminal aliens removed from the interior in 2018, the latest year that is available, were classified as aggravated felons. Nevertheless, even non-aggravated felons cause serious problems here. The tens of thousands of non-aggravated felons removed that year had convictions for seemingly every other crime on the books, including assault, burglary, child molestation, drug offenses, weapons offenses, fraud, and much, much more. Out of all interior deportations, the number of cases classified as non-aggravated felons in 2018 was 83,804. This was 88% of all interior deportations. In addition, Biden apparently has abolished use of the word alien, which does not appear in the memo in favor of the term non-citizen. I did not notice the word criminal anywhere in the document either. So, just to try to bring all of this together. To begin with, they are right on that. Alien is actually the legal term. If you are uncomfortable with the word illegal alien or the phrase illegal alien, that is actually the legal term in the way in which to explain it now. Is it going to be changed in the future? Probably. But it is illegal alien, and that is how I will refer to them, not undocumented workers or undocumented immigrants. They use this word soup. They mix everything around to try to diminish the severity of the crime that has been committed in crossing the border and then other crimes thereafter. So 83,804. So that's people that are actually caught of non-aggravated felons. All those people, they are able to stay here. And non-aggravated felonies can be domestic violence, sex offenses, drunk driving, theft of less than $10,000, vehicular homicide, an infinite number of misdemeanor crimes. So these are not, and we're not talking about. We're talking about some serious violent crimes here that do not warrant a deportation now under the Biden administration. Everyone else is going to be released, apparently, as long as they have not done any of these offenses, as long as it's not an aggravated felony or a national security threat. Other than that, everyone else gets released, and everyone else can't be sent back under Biden's rule. So, Texas, in result of this, Texas files a lawsuit against Biden's immigration policy. This is a Bongino.com article. The lawsuit, and it's written by Mike Robert Lee, the lawsuit claims that Biden's move would cause the state major financial harm. It states, and I quote, "A higher number of illegal aliens in Texas leads to budgetary harms, including higher education and healthcare costs," the lawsuit says. The unlawful reversal will cause Texas immediate and irreparable harm if it is not enjoined. End quote. Biden's move to freeze deportations for 100 days, which was a promise of his presidential campaign, has already begun being implemented by ICE. It represents a complete reversal of Donald Trump's policies seeking aggressive deportations. So, to try to bring all this together. Now, the point is, when you have a bunch of people illegally flow into the country like this, they're mostly going to hang around Texas because that is the biggest border crossing is in Texas because it borders Mexico. And a lot of people are coming from Guatemala, all different countries within Central America. And actually, in some cases, we're having people that are from the Middle East in extremist groups that actually purposely fly to Mexico and then cross the border over here. And they act like they are from the Central America when they're not. So to try to bring all this together, you have people, when they cross over, they are now not on the rolls. They do not pay taxes, but they still take advantage of the tax programs. They will go to emergency facilities, like in a hospital emergency room. There's other things that they take hold of that are supposed to be community taxed. I guess you would call them commodities. And by them doing that, they damage that there's not enough tax apparatus to pay for them. So they will raise the taxes, because there's also laws in terms of education as well in a lot of these areas where the kids still have to go to school. So then now we have kids going to school and their parents are not paying taxes to pay for the school programs. Thus, the burden of the taxation is on the citizens of the United States. The United States citizens essentially are paying for illegal immigrants to be here. And that's what's going on. So that is the point. That's why Texas filed the lawsuit. And then it also drives down the price of labor, of unskilled labor, and usually that actually affects our minority groups the most in the United States, as well as the lower class the most. So what happened is, just I think yesterday, a federal judge, which was a Trump appointee, forces Biden to rescind the suspension of deportations. And that was an AP article that I found, and I think I have it at the very bottom. I should have it at the very end. But they essentially rescind it. They say it's unconstitutional. You can't just say not to enforce the law, because there's actual constitutionality in the law. In the Constitution, there's certain laws as it relates to legalization or citizenship, how that's of the executive power, and you can't just. We have to have a legit system. A lot of time, what ends up really happening is people are trained by these coyotes, they call them, or these smugglers that are MS-13 members. They are trained on what to say with a piece of paper in their hand. They tell the person, I'm claiming asylum. Thus, if you claim asylum, you get a court date and they let you into the country. Now, of the people that get their court date, 90% of them will not show up for the court date. That is actually statistically proven. 90% do not show up to the court date. So now at this point, they're in the country, and when they claim asylum, it jumps everyone else that has been waiting to legally immigrate to the country. And that's why it's a problem. You just have a bunch of people. It's like when you're sitting it's a very simple premise here, but it seems like everyone has been convoluted because of the separation at the border, which was a former Obama policy, and it wasn't a big deal when Obama was employing it, but now suddenly it's a problem when Trump goes ahead with it. But everyone's convoluted because of that scenario. But the real problem here is it's like when you were a kid and you were sitting in the lunch line in high school and people just cut you in line. And that is acceptable, though, in America. It's acceptable to allow people to cut the line and others to sit in the back and just hang out. And it has nothing to do with, and everything is always it's so rooted in race all the time. It's like such a bummer that this is the conversation that we always have to have. And it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with wages, keeping wages at a reasonable rate for our lower class and our working class citizens, and forcing a bunch of unskilled laborers into the country to allow them to just flow into the country freely. That lowers the price of labor, which Bernie Sanders said open borders is a Koch brothers policy. It is a rich dude policy, because then they know they can get cheap labor. So next, what I have, and also additionally to supplement all this, the Biden administration has been building new facilities to prepare for the influx of immigrants. That's another one I'll have. That's a Breitbart News article. So just to go on the big, the racism bandwagon, here is a video of the travel ban questions. They asked Jen Psaki about the travel ban, because now Biden is employing a travel ban to, I think, certain countries. I think some Central African countries, as well as a couple European countries. So play clip 2.
About the announcement you made off the top about the travel restrictions. Mm-hmm. When President Trump was imposing travel restrictions in March, specifically on China, then candidate Biden called it xenophobic and fear-mongering. So now President Biden is putting travel restrictions on people coming in from other countries. What word do we use to describe that?
Well, I don't think that's quite a fair articulation. The president has been clear that he felt the Muslim ban was xenophobic. He overturned the Muslim ban.
You know what's good about the internet? What's good about the internet is that you can look up pretty much anything that somebody says now. So when politicians lie, it's now at this point the media propagates them, and they propagate this false narrative to protect them. So up on the screen here, what I have is I have Joe Biden's Twitter account. That is February 1st. Trump further diminished the U.S. in the eyes of the world by expanding his travel ban. The new African ban is designed to make it harder for black and brown people to immigrate to the United States. It's a disgrace, and we cannot let him succeed. Now, that's what he said on the 1st of February, having to do with the travel ban as it relates to COVID. Meanwhile, he implemented the exact same travel ban in Africa himself. Just recently. So just in NBC News, and this was I guess yesterday, President Biden is expected to impose travel ban Monday for most non-U.S. citizens traveling from South Africa to White House. Sources say Biden is also expected to reinstate restrictions affecting travel from the UK, Ireland, and parts of Europe. So here we go again. It's just more hypocrisy. It's just more lies that are being pushed by our media class because they're not being honest themselves and actually reporting the media. So thus, us individual citizens, as well as some conservative sources, but there's a lot of individual citizens that have social media accounts that go forward and they put together different montages, different things like that, because they have to do the job that the media is not doing currently right now. And that's because there's a lot of money. The media gets money on fear-mongering. They get money from big corporate interests. So there's a lot of money to push a fake narrative out there. Whereas with the citizens, we're looking for the truth all of the time. And that's what I'm trying to bring with this podcast. I'm trying to bring the truth to everybody. And that's why I leave everything in the show notes so you can watch it. And now this Islamic ban, I already addressed this. I'm going to address it again. The Islamic ban was not a strictly Muslim ban. It was, I think, 13 different countries that were banned. Out of Islamic countries in the world, there's 57. So of 57 countries, only 13 of them were banned. It was not a strictly Muslim ban. It was a ban on countries that were sponsors of terrorism, and we were afraid of them as a national security threat. And that was the reason that they banned travel from there. And that was another thing I want to confront. The multiculturalism by Mike Pompeo, that quote that came out, he said something like multiculturalism will be the end of America or something like that, where he says it's not conducive, it's not beneficial for America. And he's actually, and this is the problem, is there's a confounding of what he is saying. What he's saying is he's not saying anything about minority groups. He's not saying that kind of culturalism is the problem. His problem is the multiculturalism in reference to now we are not having Americanism. When you come to this country, there is supposed to be an assimilation into the culture of America, the American culture, the ideology of the principles of the First Amendment, Second Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. That is what he means. And also being an environment, a culture that works hard, doesn't look for handouts from the government. That is what he's referring to. He's not referring to people of immigrants that come here that are minority groups are the problem. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is multiculturalism. There's a culture in America, and we need to continue the culture of hard work, dedication, innovation, freedom, constitutional principles and constitutionality, and we're getting further and further away from that because we're having this idea of every single culture is okay. We can bring the ideas coming from the government, and he means this in terms of governance of Latin American countries that are a lot of them are socialists, or from Sweden or from Norway, their socialized medicine programs, or from Canada, the multiculturalism coming from there as well. We're not talking about minority groups. We're talking about that everyone, the one thing that brings Americans together is supposed to be the accepted reality of patriotism for American values and principles. So when he's referring to multiculturalism, it does not have anything to do with your ethnicity. It is more of an agreement on ideas more than a promotion of being a specific ethnic group. That's not what he's referring to. What he's referring to is the idea, the American ideas and ideals, that you own your own labor, that there's a free market, that you are free to choose where you live. The government's not going to get in your life. Those are things that are supposed to be agreed upon American principles. When a lot of people, grandparents came to this country, they came here and they had absolutely nothing, and they didn't come here with with the idea of getting Obamacare. They didn't come here for the welfare state, because at that time there was no such thing as Social Security. There was no such thing as Medicare, Medicaid. There was no unemployment. They came here because they wanted what you would call the American dream, because in America you can make it big there. Or you can work hard, be dedicated to what you do, eventually save up your income, maybe invest some of it, and then you can live very, very comfortably for the rest of your life. And that was the point of America. They said the streets were paved with gold, things of that nature. And that's what he's referring to. He's not referring to ethnic minority groups, as has been misconceived in the media purposefully. Of course, it's been used to try to deceive you. So Senators Mull invoking the 14th Amendment to prevent Trump from holding office again. This is a Daily Caller piece, and it's just going to, the Democrat senators are floating around this idea that they're going to go ahead with the 14th Amendment to bar the former president from holding office again, and this would have to be this would have to comport with the idea that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection or called for rebellion. So Section 3 of the 14th Amendment states that no public official who has taken an oath to the Constitution may hold public office again after holding or having engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. The House has officially charged Trump with incitement of insurrection in his second impeachment on January 14th, but he has yet to be convicted of the charge in the Senate. So that's what we're going to see going forward. That's another thing. I don't think I mentioned this, and I'm going to now. The impeachment right now is a complete hoax. It's a sham. It's not real. It's a fake impeachment. It's pretty much just a procedural hearing. There's nothing real about it, because to begin with, it's not constitutional, because the person has to be in office that is being impeached. Because they have to be, the impeachment, if successful, has to follow through with someone losing, being taken out of their office, which the person is not in office. Therefore, this impeachment is erroneous. It's not real. It's legitimately procedurally fake. It is not real. And also, the Chief Justice Roberts, who is not a fan of Trump, did not show up to oversee, which thus makes it, in essence, fake and not real also, because he sees that there's no precedent for this. And I just wanted to mention that. If any of your liberal friends come up to you and are talking about insurrection, and to begin with, they're not going to get him on charges of insurrection. They're not going to get him on charges of incitement of violence, because I already debunked the Washington Post, the narrative that they came forward with. It is not legitimate, because by the time he was done with his speech, people were already trying to break into the Capitol building. So numerous major U.S. cities begin in 2021 with elevated homicide rates. This is a Just the News piece. This one's pretty awesome. Just a couple of statistics to understand what this whole defund the police narrative really is going to do to not only your suburbs, but especially the big cities, and what has been happening over these last couple of months. This is written by Daniel Payne. Numerous cities nationwide reported elevated murder rates throughout the year, with cities like Chicago, New York, and Philly posting double-digit increases. So the latest crime report by Chicago year-to-date, homicides are up 43% around comparatively to last year. So we have a 43% increase in homicides. So shooting incidents, and you know what's really weird about this is most other crime categories, violent or otherwise, are actually down in the early weeks of 2021, but shooting incidences were up 61%. So we're seeing more shooting incidences, and we're also seeing more homicides right now, and that's going on in Chicago, and this comports with all the other big cities here that we're going to mention. New York, similar, 42% increase year-to-date murder rate, 94% relative to the prior year. It was up, 94% relative to the prior year. As with Chicago, most other crimes rates were down as well, but it seems like the murder rate and the shootings rate is much higher. Los Angeles next. Oh, so this is even worse. You want to hear this staggering number here? In the big city in New York, the city saw 319 homicides in 2019. The number was up 468. And that was only the months of the rioting and the defund the police narrative. That was about 6 months. So that was only half a year with that ideology in place, and we're seeing a huge increase in homicides and the number of homicides. Imagine that goes for a full year. That number is going to be exacerbated. It's not going to be 468. It's going to be much higher than that. It'll probably be in the 500s or the 600s if I had to guess. Los Angeles also posted sharply elevated homicide rates going into 2021, with murders up a staggering 136% year-to-date compared to 2020, jumping from 11 to 26. Aggravated assaults were also up 17.5% during the same period comparatively to last year, leaving the overall violent crime increase to 3.7%. So that's not as bad, I guess, but the murders are up much more. But it's also, there's not as many murders in Los Angeles, it seems, as there is, or is that just this month? Oh boy. Oh no, that's just starting this year, I guess, around this time. So I guess it's the same. It's a higher rate. And then to finish up, I have more big cities. Philly, I have year-to-date homicides this year so far is 33, and this is a 3% increase, which isn't much, yet it is still 50% higher than the year-to-date average of the past 14 years. Philly's murders last year were up 40% from the prior year, so the last 2 years Philly's been having a real hard time with murder. District of Columbia, violent crime in 2021 so far was up 15% compared to the same time frame in 2020, with homicides up 22% and sexual abuse up 33%. Seattle's, and this is the last one, Seattle's year-to-date crime data was not readily available on its website, though the city's data from 2020 show that Seattle saw a 48% spike in murders last year in 2019, as well as a slight rise in aggravated assault, arson, burglary, and motor vehicle theft. All saw notable increases as well, which is obvious because of all of the arson that was going on and the burglary during these BLM protests, riots. So this is what the defund the police narrative does. You see these liberal mayors, left-wing mayors, are pretty much taking the ability away of their law enforcement officers to do their jobs, and they're telling them to pretty much stand down and just let shit happen in their individual states, which is a shame. So next what I have is Biden ends partial ban on transgender soldiers in the military. National Review piece is written by Zachary Evans, and this is something that's also been misconceived by the media, probably purposely, as everything else seems to have been, about the idea of the transgender ban of the military from the Trump administration, which is actually not true. It is not a complete ban of transgenders in the military, and I will go on to explain this. Now, President Biden signed an executive order on Monday to lift restrictions on transgender Americans who wish to serve in the U.S. military. Biden's order allows all transgender soldiers to serve openly and to receive gender reassignment surgery under the military's health plan. So we're going to be paying for people to get gender reassignment surgery under the new military's health plans because of Joe Biden now lifting these restrictions. So President Biden believes that gender identity should not be a bar to military service, and that America's strength is found in its diversity. So I'm going to point out all the problems with that statement. On the military, on the battlefield, when there's a dangerous situation and we have gunfire going back and forth, do you think the soldier or the Marine thinks in their head, well, thank God we have diversity. I don't know what we would be doing in this fight if we did not have that. That is not how our military works. Our military is a merit-based system to be the most effective to prevent death of American soldiers and Marines. That is the point of the American military. The American military is not out there to be a social justice group or allow as much inclusion as possible. Now, the way I think of it is there's actually been studies conducted where we have women and men. We have, what would you call that? I don't even know what you would call it, but you have them integrated together in combat situations, and actually it's been found when women get shot and wounded, men will not leave them out to die, and it actually causes more and more casualties because of this, which is why I think we've been pushing, from what I understand in our military, to push towards combat troops that are much more homogenous male. And it's also because women have certain biological restrictions and carrying only so much weight and lasting so long, and they need to shower every once in a while, or else there's infections that they get. I'm not going to go deep into it, but that is not the way that our military works. It is not about diversity in our personnel. We look at the most battle-structured, the most efficient, the most effective force possible. That is the point of the military. The military isn't an equal opportunity employer. Thus, if you are overweight, you should not be in the military. There's a lot of restrictions on being in the military. I think Lyme's disease is another one. There's a couple different ones. You have certain allergies. I think you can't be in the military. You have to be at a certain type of shape. So it's not a equal opportunity employee. It doesn't just take everybody on almost as like a welfare state. And that's kind of what they're explaining here. Like, diversity is paramount in the military, and that is not true. What is paramount in the military is having the best possible fighting force that you can get. So former President Trump announced the partial ban on transgender soldiers via Twitter in 2017, taking then Secretary of Defense James Mattis by surprise. The Obama administration took steps in 2016 to allow transgender soldiers to serve openly for the first time. Trump's ban allowed transgender soldiers to serve as long as they did not require special accommodation. So this is the real part here where the media has been really flipping around the story and not covering this part. So the ban from Trump was not a transgender ban. It was a ban if they did not require, or if they required some sort of special accommodation, then they were banned or they were barred from military service. If they needed something like hormone therapy or gender reassignment surgery, that was considered the special accommodation. That would bar them. A 2016 study by the Rand Corporation concluded that medical costs to the U.S. military for transgender-related issues stood between $2.4 million and $8.4 million annually. So that was really saving the taxpayer money on gender reassignment surgery or hormone therapies that would be paid through the military that now we will be paying. So this is the most important part here. The Trump administration has clarified that a self-identified transgender person who does not require special accommodation should be permitted to serve. So the only thing that bars them is the special accommodation. Now you say, what is the special accommodations? As for why gender dysphoria constitutes special accommodations and is therefore disqualifying, Department of Defense data gives an idea. Between October 1st, 2015 and October 3rd, 2017, the 994 active duty service members diagnosed with gender dysphoria account for 30,000 mental health visits. So 994 of our active duty service members diagnosed with gender dysphoria account for 30,000 mental health visits. Service members with gender dysphoria are 8 times more likely to attempt suicide than service members as a whole. That is the main root of the problem. We do not want to put people in a military situation, high-stress situation, where they can form some sort of PTSD, and we do not want them to commit suicide or, with their weapon, damage other members that are in their unit. That was the point of this ban. This ban really was a ban on the idea of having to pay for gender reassignment surgery and hormone therapy. That was the only thing that would bar you from military service, which essentially is just, okay, well, we're not paying for that. That's not a legitimate, to us, to the Trump administration. I know many are going to disagree with this, but that is not a required treatment. That is not something that is completely necessary. It's not like you got a bad infection on your leg and you need surgery. So the Obama, and this is to end everything, to bring everything together here. And I've been commenting on this Keystone Pipeline. Seems like liberals really don't care about it, and I'm just perplexed that they don't. That 70,000 jobs have been essentially taken away, 11,000 instantly, and then predicted, I think the other 70,000 are predicted from the pipeline how many jobs would have been created. So to explain this here, I have a Washington Post piece. So it's a liberal news site. Obama's State Department confirms Keystone Pipeline would be unlikely to alter global greenhouse gas emissions. This is by Juliet Alperin and Stephen Mufson. It was written on January 31st, 2014. So this is the Obama State Department evaluation of the Keystone Pipeline that they continued to push back with no significant evidence that it would actually increase carbon emissions. And also there was also a report in Nebraska in 2018 as well on this, stating pretty much the same thing. And I'm going to have both of them, I should have both of them in the show notes. So the report said that the proposed project is unlikely to significantly affect the rate of extraction in oil sand areas based on expected oil prices, oil sand supply costs, transport costs, and supply-demand scenarios. Now, the report estimated the project would generate about 1,950 annual construction jobs in Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas over a 2-year period, and contribute about $3.4 billion to the U.S. gross domestic product. It would generate about 50 jobs once in operation. Now, it's much more than this because of how big the pipeline got under Trump, and how he pretty much had it going all the way to Texas, I'm pretty sure. The assessment also said, and this is the most important part, and this is what I was explaining before, and apparently there's some dark money behind this, the rail transportation system, and that's why they canceled this pipeline, because some really rich guys own the rail transportation system. The assessment also said that a variety of rail transportation options would result in 28% to 42% more emissions than this pipeline. The State Department has cited rail as a reason why blocking the pipeline would not slow oil sands development, although a spate of oil train derailments, including a derailment Friday in southeast Mississippi, has highlighted the dangers of that alternative. So, what this one's saying here is you have derailments from the rail transportation system. When that happens, that's a giant oil spill. This oil pipeline, this is going straight through. And if you look it up, you cannot actually find, and I've looked through this, maybe you can find one isolated scenario, where an oil pipeline has ruptured and caused mass hysteria and mass damage to the environment. Whereas you can find oil rigs all the time. There's stories of giant oil rigs dumping accidentally in the middle of the ocean. This happens all of the time. This is very common. Off the Gulf of Mexico, I think it happened a couple of years ago. I don't remember exactly the name of the company, the oil spills that happen frequently. And it also happens in the rail transportation system. So we have a safer way to get oil to the United States, and it also goes straight down a pipeline. So it's actually much more efficient. It does not have to be transported through a oil tanker or a giant ship to get it here, and it's also less likely to spill. So we have a system set up here where it's actually more environmentally friendly. But by doing this is the assumption here that people will somehow just stop consuming oil. That's not what's going to happen. The consumption will still be the same. Just we will now be getting the oil from different places. That's the only difference. And now we're going to pay more for oil to get here. And we're also going to cause more carbon emissions for the oil to get here, because it's going to come on either a rail transportation system or it's going to come on a ship from overseas. We're going to be much more reliant on Iran as well as Russia, which is not good for us as a country. Or you will see commodities blow up. You'll see everything just explode. So here is to the point where I get to my end of show headlines here. And I'm going to go through them. I'm going to say some really brief stuff about it. So first and I'm going to have all of this in the show notes once again under the description below. Trump opens up office of the former president. So recently, this is a Just the News piece. Recently, Trump just opened up the office of the former president. I think he's looking to make some big moves. Apparently, he's not going to do the third party thing. We're just going to go ahead, and this is how Trump is going to try to push a conservative agenda. So next, what I have, Amazon fights against mail-in voting in union decision to preserve vote fidelity. And this is a Breitbart piece. It's hilarious because Amazon is now fighting against a mail-in vote to unionize, because they said that it doesn't preserve the integrity by sending it through the vote. It can be easily manipulated. So 4 governors order troops out of D.C. after seeing 5,000 troops sent to parking garage in 30-degree temperature. This one was a huge story. This is an Epic Times piece. We had 5,000 of our troops from the National Guard was sent to a parking garage in 30-degree temperature to sleep because that's what the Congress people told them to do. They threw it on Congress. There was one congressperson that saw one of them without a mask, got all angry about it, and then they ordered them to a parking garage. It was a big hysteria. So 4 different governors pretty much forced all their guys out of there. One of them, I think, was DeSantis, and then I think the guy from Texas, too, Abbott, and I don't remember the other 2. It's pretty disgraceful. And these 5,000 troops, they had one bathroom. Like, I understand. Here's the thing. There's a lot of people that come out, they're in the military, and they're going ahead with the, overseas we sleep in way worse, and we deal with this. And, like, I understand, and I appreciate everything that you guys do for us, right? But you guys are in domestic territory. You are in America. Why is it that you guys are being treated like this in America? You're not in Iraq. You're not in Iran. You're in the United States of America. Why the heck are you sleeping in a parking garage at 30-degree temperatures? That's the point. And yeah, they had one bathroom, they had like one outlet or something. I mean, the story is ridiculous. So next is Biden calls Boris Johnson before other European leaders to plan Build Back Better agenda. Who knows what's going to come from that? That's a Breitbart piece. And then I have also Carolyn Maloney is asking, or she already did this. This was from a couple days ago. She asked the FBI to investigate Pauler. Meanwhile, it's been debunked that Pauler was not. There was much more of this this January 6th attack on the Capitol was planned actually on Twitter and Facebook much more than it was on Pauler, but she just wants them investigated because, you know, they hate conservatism. So Biden's pause on the oil cause for big concern in New Mexico. So I went over this, but in New Mexico, actually, it's reported, and this is an AP piece from the Associated Press, it's reported that about 30 to 40% of all of their programs, in terms of, you know, their taxation, their revenue, the way they run their school system, the whole government programs, 30 to 40% of them are from oil. It's from the subsidies of oil. It's from whatever the taxation is being taken in from the oil industry. So shutting down, pausing the oil is a huge concern in New Mexico. They will no longer be able to fund their school system. And next, I have Mexican leader, which is, I think it's the Mexican president said it. Biden offers $4 billion in Central America. That is another AP piece. He is offering $4 billion to Central America to rebuild their infrastructure and fix their government. I think it's countries such as Guatemala is one of them. I know that much. And essentially, it's just a payoff to have people not come to America, maybe. I'm not really exactly sure. I think it's a feudal payoff. I think nothing will happen with it because there's so much corruption in those governments. People will just take it and they'll put it in their pocket. And the people, the citizens in the country that really actually deserve a better life, they will be forced into more and more destitution because of it. But it is funny that now we're just sending money over to Central America. It's as soon as he takes office is what's going on. So Ted Cruz, another one I have. Ted Cruz reintroduces a term limit bill. I went over this before. It would extend, or it would limit term limits for the senators. It would be 2 terms, and senators run a 6-year term, so they'd be in the government for 12 years tops. And then House of Representatives, they'd be able to have 3 terms. They hold 2-year terms so 6 years for them. And this won't go through because the government loves to have power. I actually like the idea of this because the government will be less. There'll be less camaraderie. They won't be as organized against the people to really push through legislation. I think it will actually slow down the legislative process, which is a good thing for America. It will keep us much more principled in our values, and we'll really think about actually, it'll have to be a real major consensus problem to switch policy around rather than at a whim of whoever's in government at that time. We're just switching policy left and right. So, and next is, this is a Breitbart article. It's a Rasmussen poll. Rich and wealthy welcome illegal aliens. Apparently they really, really like the idea of having illegal aliens, the rich and wealthy, which makes sense because then that's cheaper labor for them to pay into. And lastly, Alan Dershowitz calls, and that's the Trump's lawyer. He was also, I want to say he was OJ's lawyer, maybe? No, he was Bill Clinton's lawyer as well. He calls the disbarring of Giuliani McCarthyism, and he said he would defend him in court. And he's like the best lawyer in the country. This is an Epoch Times piece. So essentially what they want to do is they want to disbar, they want to take away Giuliani's license to be a lawyer because of his affiliation with Trump and his allegiance to Trump. And Alan Dershowitz says, or the Bar Association wants to take it away from him, and Alan Dershowitz said, I will defend him in that case. So that's really it. That wraps everything up. I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. Please make sure you check. I'm going to have a weekend special. We'll see what comes out in the next couple days. I think today was a pretty big news day, but I was not able to really look into it yet. But I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe. Let people know about the podcast. Word of mouth is how this podcast gets across. Also, my posts on Facebook. That's really all I have because I'm unable still at this point to advertise on any of the social media sites because they hate conservative content. So thank you, everybody. Everyone have a great day.